Alright, so John Cola with OKRaw.com. Today we have another exciting episode for you, coming at you from my beautiful backyard garden here in February. And we got some published studies, guys, to go over with you guys. One is actually brand new, 2025, and then one is actually from 2024. And actually, these studies will show that being raw vegan is superior to being vegan or even omnivore. And actually in these studies, it actually shows that omnivores have less toxins in their bloodstream than vegans, which is insane. So I encourage you guys, no matter what diet you guys are on, to reduce these toxins, and I will give you actionable tips on how to do it at the end of this video. In any case, let's dive into these studies and some of my supplementary information so you can learn more about these toxins and how raw vegans avoid them and how you can avoid them too if you want to. All right, guys, so these studies came out in the journal Archives of Toxicology. So obviously we're talking about toxins. And this first study is entitled Internal Exposure to Heat-Induced Food Contaminants in Omnivores, Vegans, and Strict Raw Food Eaters. Biomarkers of exposure to acrylamide, hemoglobin adjuncts, urinary mercury, captic acid, and new insights on endogenous formation. So what does that mean? That basically, they're saying they're measuring acrylamide, which, raw vegans know is a toxin, and some people maybe know about it. I mean, if you're in the European Union, you guys get a lot more messaging about acrylamide than we do here in the United States, and there are limits as to how much should and can be consumed, and how manufacturers need to prepare foods to reduce and minimize your acrylamides. I don't think here in the US we have such laws, unfortunately. So it's up to people to learn about acrylamides themselves. And of course, as a raw vegan, you're not going to eat any acrylamides, because acrylamides are formed when you heat food at dry temperatures above 248 degrees. And of course, raw food temperature is 118 degrees. So if you're raw vegan, you're never going to eat any acrylamide because you're not eating things processed at high temperatures. Anyways, let's dive into this study. So the abstract, it's all big fancy words. I'm just going to go ahead and share the basics. So the basics are AAMA and GAMA are short-term biomarkers of exposure from acrylamide and its metabolite glycidamide, respectively. The medium-term exposures to acrylamide and glycidamide is monitored by the adducts AA-val and GA-val in hemoglobin. So this study included 36 omnivores, 36 vegans, and 16 strict raw food eaters who abstained from any warmed or heated food for at least 4 months. That's how they defined raw food eaters. So let's go ahead and go down in this study. I will link all these studies, guys, right down below for you guys if you want to review them yourself and not just trust my interpretation. All right. So I was going to read you this little part here that talks about acrylamide and how toxic it is, but I have it summed up in some other slides that's going to make this video a lot shorter. But I did want to go over, they did blood and urine testing from 88 adults. 36 were omnivores, 18 were female and male, 26 non-smokers, and then they had 36 vegans, 18 were female, 18 were male, and 31 were non-smokers. In the raw food eaters, they did 16 raw food eaters, 5 were female, 11 were male, and of course, all of the raw food eaters were non-smoking. Generally, people get into raw food for the health, so generally, they're not going to smoke. It's rare that I see a raw food eater that is a smoker. So anyways, let's just go down to the main gist of this study, which is the results. So they got all these fancy charts where you can see the AAMA and GAMA, which is basically short-term biomarkers of acrylamide. You guys can see the raw in the green is significantly below either the red for the omnivores or the gray for the vegans. But I want to see the actual data numbers. All right, so here is the data numbers for the AAMA and GAMA. And as you guys can see, for omnivores non-smokers, it's 62.4. So actually, that's not bad. Actually, that's the lowest, right? And if we go to vegan non-smokers, right, it goes up. So vegans are more toxic in terms of acrylamide exposure, because guess what? Acrylamide is formed when asparagine, which is a sugar, is heated at hot temperatures in dry environments. So like think potatoes or bread. So I would think that vegans eat a lot more potatoes and bread that are especially fried or heated at too hot of a temperature than omnivores, because omnivores are eating, meats and other things that are heated at too high temperatures and create other different kinds of toxins that I'm not discussing in this episode. So and if you're an omnivore smoker, you're basically at 86.5, which is worse than a vegan non-smoker. But if you're a vegan smoker, guys, if you guys are vegan smokers, hopefully you're not doing it for your health, because you guys have really terrible, large amounts of acrylamide. And acrylamide, as you'll learn in a minute, is associated with a lot of different health challenges, I'll say that. 160, guys, that's insanity. But if you're a raw food eater, check it out, guys. Raw food eaters, 15.4. That's like 10 times less than vegan smokers, 4 times less than omnivores, and 5 times less than vegan non-smokers. This is the reason to be raw vegan, so that you don't eat acrylamide. That's basically is highly toxic, in my opinion, and you should avoid it. That being said, I'll share with you guys mitigation strategies. So even if you are an omnivore or a vegan, you can minimize your acrylamide intake and actually get it as low as a raw food eater. All right. So just to ensure that these are accurate, they did another metabolite, or the GAMA, which also is another different way to measure the exposure of acrylamide on a short-term basis. So the omnivore non-smokers were 5.7. The vegan non-smokers were 8.2. The omnivore smokers were higher at 10.5, and the vegan smokers were the highest at 14.4. So once again, if you guys are doing this for your health, in this case, the omnivore was the lowest, but once again, the raw food eater kicked butt once again, over 3 times lower than even the omnivore, over 4 times lower than the vegans, right? So once again, being raw vegan is cool, because you're going to minimize your toxin exposure through specifically the over processing and especially overheating of food. All right, so we just learned the AAMA and GAMA, which is basically short-term acrylamide exposure. Check through the urine. Next up, we're going to get into the AA-val and GA-val in blood samples, which shows the medium term exposure. So that measures over a longer period of time than just like more within the immediate time zone exposure of acrylamide. Okay, so we're going to look at the omnivores, the vegans, the omnivore smokers, and the vegan smokers and the raw. So as you guys can see, always the raw food eaters are significantly lower in the AA-val and GA-val, because once again, they are not consuming heat processed foods that contain acrylamide, right? And this is medium term exposure. So medium term exposure will show more than just what you're eating. So let's go down and check out the data. All right, so on the AA-val marker, the omnivores non-smokers were 27.7. The vegan non-smokers were 39.7. Once again, that is higher than omnivores. So, vegans have more toxins running in their blood than omnivores that are even eating meat. Of course, these are mostly plant-based cooked food toxins, not animal-based cooked food toxins, which is not covered in this episode. Of course, omnivore smokers were higher at 52.2, but then vegan smokers, guys, like, if health is important, don't be a vegan smoker, because you have the highest levels of medium-term acrylamide exposure in your blood. And of course, raw food eaters were 13.3, right? That's over 2 times less than omnivores, maybe 3 times less than vegan non-smokers. Next up, the GA valve, once again, another marker of medium-term acrylamide exposure. 14.2 for the omnivores, 18.5 for the vegans, which is higher than omnivores. Omnivore smokers, 22.6, and vegan smokers, 26.3. And then raw food eaters, 6.1. So that's at least 2 times lower than the omnivores, 3 times lower than the vegans. Once again, proving raw vegans who are not eating cooked foods have less acrylamide exposure. That being said, unlike the chart above, the AAMA that we saw was very low, even the raw vegans had 13.3 and 6.1. You're like, if they're not eating any cooked food, how could they have medium-term exposure for a longer period of time on these toxins. So some of it may be endogenously. So like our bodies may make some when we digest different kinds of foods, for example, and or you may get some acrylamides from the environment. So I mean, there's lots of studies on acrylamide exposure in like chemical factories where people are really damaged, unfortunately, from them. So yeah, even if we don't eat cooked foods, we're still going to have significantly smaller amounts of the acrylamide in us. But, you know, in my opinion, the goal is to minimize all toxins that we ingest so that our body does not have to deal with them and we don't get the negative health repercussions from them. All right, so once again, this study is linked down below if you guys want to look more into it. I'm just kind of going over the basics for you. And so now I want to get into the next study done also by the same main researcher, Bernard H. Moinen. So thank you, Bernard, for doing this so that raw vegans, and everybody, omnivores, could learn about these toxins that actually do get absorbed and they are a real thing. So anyways, this study talks about something a little bit more esoteric because most people don't even know about this toxin unless you're a toxicologist or something. This is called internal exposure to heat-induced food contaminants in omnivores, vegans, and strict raw food eaters. Biomarkers of exposure to 2 and 3 Monochloropropanediol, urinary excretion, and Glycidol, hemoglobin adjunct N-2-3 dioxyval. All right. So these are basically 3 more cooked food toxins that not only appear in plant-based foods, but also animal foods. All right. So let's go down into these, into the abstract. Basically 2/3 MCPD and Glycidol are formed mainly during heat processing or deodorization of vegetable oils, okay? And then the Internal Agency for Research on Cancer has classified 3 MCPD as possibly and Glycidol as probable carcinogens to humans. And we will learn in a second some of the repercussions that can happen to you if you have high levels of these and the toxic and what could happen to you actually. So anyways, we're just once again going to cut down. We're not going to go over this study. It's all crazy stuff. But you can see once again they had 36 omnivores in the 2017, 18 female and male, 26 non-smokers, 36 vegans, basically the same data set. So basically they collected a lot of blood and urine from these people and tested many different markers. And these are just 2 of the studies. Hopefully more studies will come out in the future. Anyways, they share how they did it exactly, but I'm going to go down to the results once again. So you can see on the 2 MCPD and 3 MCPD, the raw group, right, was definitely the lowest, like way lower than omnivores or vegans, whether they smoked or not. Let's go down to the actual numbers. So here is the 2 MCPD. The omnivores had 0.87. The vegan non-smokers had 1.35. The omnivore smokers had more than the vegans at 1.49. And once again, vegan smokers, guys, man, it's terrible if you're a vegan smoker. You need to stop smoking and stop eating all this processed food junk. 2.02, and you can see raw food eaters kick their ass. 0.13 of this toxin. That's, I don't even know, like what, at least 5 times lower than omnivores, 10 times lower than vegan non-smokers, all right? Next toxin, 3 MCPD, omnivore non-smokers 0.79, vegan non-smokers higher at 1.03, omnivore smokers at 1.49, vegan smokers at 1.74. And of course, raw food eaters basically had it barely detectable at, once again, 0.14. Super impressive, guys. This is one of the many reasons why I eat raw. But even though I heat process my food, I also avoid all these toxins, as you guys will learn in a minute. Anyways, let's go down and learn about one more toxin that they checked in the blood, which was the DHP-Val. And you guys can see, once again, the raw food eaters, the lowest compared to omnivores, vegans, smoking omnivores, or smoking vegans. Right? Guys, when you smoke cigarettes or whatever else, lots of toxins are created during the burning of whatever you are inhaling. So I encourage you guys not to smoke. Anyways, let's go down to the actual numbers from this study for the DHP-Val. So omnivore non-smokers 3.9, vegan non-smokers 3.9. So the same vegan omnivore smokers were 6.8 and vegan smokers 10.0. I mean, man, vegan smokers, they got it bad. They got the most toxic blood and urine and toxins floating around in them. And raw food eaters, once again, guys, 1.9, half as much as the omnivores or the vegans in this study. So, you know, here's the thing. What do we learn? We learned that raw vegans are less toxic than omnivores or vegans. So, you know, I want to sum it up for you guys now in an easy to look at format. So here is a graph that I made up, bar graph based on the study data, actual study data. I took the short-term exposure to heat-induced contaminants. So we got the acrylamide and the glycidol, which is once again the exposure to short-term exposure to acrylamide. So you guys could see the raw food vegans, acrylamide and glycidol, super low compared to omnivores, which are significantly higher, and then vegans even higher, omnivore smokers even worse than vegans, and vegan smokers absolute worst. Next up, the gamma, which in the orange, very low once again on the raw vegans, omnivores higher, vegans higher, omnivore smokers even higher, vegan smokers the highest. And then the 2 MCPD, 3 MCPD, basically they're 0.13 and 1.2 or something on the raw vegan, so that's not even showing up on my graph. Whereas the omnivores, the vegans, and the omnivore smokers and the vegan smokers, you know, considerably higher, guys. So, you know, here's the thing. I want everybody out there watching this to eat more raw vegan, to eat more plant foods in their raw, natural, uncooked state, right? Minimally processed, so you don't create these toxins, and also you get more, in most cases, of the phytonutrients and nutrients in the food. All right, next up, here is a graph I made of the long-term exposure to heat-induced contaminants. Once again, the AA-val, GA-val from the first study, and the Glycidol from the second study. On the raw vegans, once again, you could see they're still at least half as much as the omnivore, significantly less than the vegans, and less than the omnivore smokers and the vegan smokers, which have the most toxins in them. So yeah, and then these two are also lower as well. But this really shows the huge difference that being raw vegan can make in terms of these long-term, you know, exposure to toxins that are in your bloodstream. The previous graph showed the basically urine test or more immediate. All right, so let's get into some of the health risks from these toxins. So this is for acrylamide. What are the health risks of acrylamide? You guys could read it all, but basically it's genotoxic, neurotoxic, carcinogenic, reproductive toxicity, and immunotoxicity, right? So, I mean, my opinion, we don't want these things in our diet, and if you don't eat highly processed foods cooked the wrong way, you can avoid all these things, guys. You don't have to be raw vegan to avoid all these things. So next up, let's go ahead and show you guys how you could avoid, you know, high acrylamide exposure by just, you know, being more selective at what you eat, all right? So here's the thing, guys. This is a graph of high acrylamide foods. You know, if you pick up a potato at the store and bite into it raw, there's like like no acrylamide in it, basically, or hardly any, because it's just maybe some naturally occurring. But the minute the potatoes are fried into chips or made into potato chips or French fries, you guys could see the acrylamide levels go up. So, I mean, you would think vegans, you know, are eating French fries and potato chips because they're plants and they're not animals and they're doing something healthy. But meanwhile, it's significantly high in acrylamide. Snack foods, chocolate products, crackers, nuts and nut butters that are roasted, once again, breads and bakery products, coffee, cereals, cookies. These are all things in a normal vegan diet because vegan diets are not inherently healthy. Actually, as proven by this study, they're inherently more toxic than an omnivore because vegans are eating more, you know, foods that are heated at hot temperatures that have the asparagine that the starch, you know, have, and then they create more acrylamide. And then you can see here, protein foods lower, canned fruits and vegetables lower, dairy even lower, frozen vegetables the lowest, infant formulas have very little. All right, so here's the key takeaway from this slide, right? If you make your food at home, like I make everything myself at home, it's rare that I eat anything processed that is highly, well, I don't eat any ultra processed foods, and I may eat some, box beans or something that have been pre-cooked with water. But nonetheless, if like you gotta nix the processed food, so be whole food, plant-based vegans, right? Don't eat processed foods that somebody else made because you can't control the temperature it was cooked at, right? Number one. And number two, when you are preparing your food at home, right, don't use high heat. I talk about this constantly. I have a link down below to my video where I discuss heat cooked food toxins, which acrylamide is just one of them, right? And so if you cooking at high heat, what do I define as high heat? I define high heat as over 248 degrees because that is when acrylamide forms. Now, not only does it take high heat over 248, and the hotter you get, the more acrylamide forms. So if you eat, like, I just saw in a recent TV show, this girl eating like potatoes she put on the fire, they're just completely black. It turned her mouth black. That's acrylamide city, guys. Like, that's insanity. I'm like, man, that's insane. But she has no clue because she doesn't know these things, right? Don't eat things that are blackened. If things are stuck to your pan, blackened or browned, right? That's more acrylamide formation. You guys could see it, and also it's the Maillard reaction happening. You could taste it because generally those components taste good, right? So that's number one. Don't heat things above 248. You're like, John, how am I going to cook anything, man, if I want to cook some food? Well, do it how I do it. You can steam, you can boil, you can pressure cook, right? That does not get above 248. The next thing is very important, guys. You want to cook in wet heat, not dry heat. Acrylamide only forms in dry heat, guys. So above 248, dry heat. So think a lot of vegans, unfortunately, have air fryers. Air fryers work above 248, and they're dry heat that then creates acrylamide, right? That's why I only encourage people to use an Instant Pot or steaming or boiling to cook their food, because it's always going to be below 248, and it's going to be a wet heat that is not going to form any acrylamide. So I take whole purple potatoes that actually have less sugar in them than standard russets. So that's another way to reduce acrylamide, is use potatoes that are not as sweet and aren't going to basically turn into acrylamide. But then I take purple potatoes that are less sweet, also higher in polyphenols, things like anthocyanins, and then I basically put them in my pressure cooker and pressure cook them for like 8 minutes. And then to me, I mean, I haven't tasted French fries in like forever, but like, they're good, guys. I mean, yeah, they don't have that crisp bite to them, and they're a little bit more moist, but I'm not getting any acrylamide, and I'm getting the benefits of eating some of those purple potatoes with the anthocyanins, and especially the resistant starch in the potatoes that I believe to be quite good. So yeah, I want you guys, whether you guys are raw vegan or not, to eliminate your acrylamide consumption, and you can be smart about it. Like, even though I eat heat processed foods now, I don't eat any acrylamide still, because I believe that's a bad toxin. But unfortunately, most Americans, most people around the world are still eating acrylamides, right? So stop eating this packaged food, garbage stuff, make it yourself and cook it in the best ways possible, as I just shared, all right? Next up, let's go ahead and talk about the Chloropropanols. So this is the 2 and 3 MCPD and the Glycidol, well, similar to the Glycidol. This is the toxicity that could happen to you. So once again, these toxins that occur in heat processed foods have neurotoxicity, cardiotoxicity, mess up your heart, kidney toxicity, right? Reproductive toxicity, immunolotoxicity. So basically, it's going to mess up your immune system, mess up your heart, mess up your brain, mess up your kidneys, and then also you won't be able to have babies. And there's a lot of, I mean, when I was a kid, like, nobody had to go to like doctors to help them have a baby because they were toxic, but it's like all these processed foods and junk foods are causing these toxicities. Not to say that your specific problem is caused by this toxin, but it's just the flood of toxins that people are including in their diets that they have no clue what the heck it's doing. So once again, I avoid all of these chloropropanols by just being wise. So let's go into this next slide where I share with you guys how to avoid them as well. All right, so for the Glycidol, it's in foods like refined vegetable oils, processed foods, margarine and shortening, baby food containing processed vegetable oils, or other foods containing processed vegetable oils. So Glycidol is formed at above, I think, is it 396 degrees Fahrenheit. So instead of choosing refined vegetable oils, right, choose cold pressed oils. Make sure it says cold pressed, guys, because I've seen coconut oil that is refined. We want to not get refined oils. A lot of times those oils are rancid. Then they further heat them, filter them so that they have like a oil they could sell so it doesn't smell nasty. But you guys want to get cold pressed. And even better yet, cold press your own oils. That's what I do myself, guys. I'm like crazy. Link down below to my video where I share with you how to cold press your own flax oil so that you have none of these toxins created, because you're doing it at a low temperature, making yourself, your flax is not going to go rancid or bad, because I actually show you guys how to remove the oxygen that's put into it during the process. Anyways, and then of course you want to avoid deep fried and processed foods. Check your ingredient labels. Like if there's oils in there, man, I would say avoid it. Cook at lower temperatures, right? Avoid high heat frying. I would just say, you should just always either steam, put it in an Instant Pot to pressure cook, or boil it. I like Instant Pot personally. All right, for the next toxin, 2-MCPD. That's in processed meats, hot dogs, sausages, smoked meats, soy sauce, and hydrolyzed vegetable proteins, HVPs, and refined vegetable oils. So why were vegans higher than omnivores? Well, they be eating TVP, or texturized vegetable proteins, which may be likely hydrolyzed, which then they're going to eat more of the 3-MCPDs. Once again, these are highly processed foods, and although they're vegan and the animals did not have to suffer to make TVP, right, it's not good for your health. So I encourage you guys to eat beans for protein, man. Eat real beans yourself. Soak them and cook them, or, some beans can be soaked and sprouted, like lentils if you want to eat them. And then also soy sauce, soy sauce that is hydrolyzed in acid. So think Bragg's liquid aminos is made by hydrolysis, not through traditional fermentation. Soy sauces that are made through traditional fermentation, like I buy soy sauces from Japan. Some of the bottles I buy are like $40. They're traditionally fermented for 3 to 5 years and non-pasteurized. So I'm getting like real stuff, not made like the fast turn soy sauce that they could put out for $2 a bottle at the store, right? So you guys want to avoid these highly processed, cheap foods that are made to basically take the place of expensive craft quality foods. All right. So anyways, you want to opt for fresh, unprocessed meats or plant-based alternatives. I would just say whole, real foods. Use traditionally brewed soy sauce instead of acid hydrolyzed versions. Avoid foods with hydrolyzed vegetable protein, HVP, or I would even say TVP. And then once again, you want to choose cold pressed, unrefined oils. Very important. And then of course, 3-MCPD related to the 2-MCPD, soy sauces and hydrolyzed vegetable proteins, refined vegetable oils, and processed foods. Using these oils, instant soups, noodles, gravy mixes, bread crusts, toasted cereals. So once again, to avoid these, choose naturally brewed soy sauce, no acid hydrolysis. Use homemade sauces and soups instead of instant versions. Bake at lower temperatures instead of high heat. Toasting, read food labels to avoid refined oils and additives. So here's the thing, guys. I just recommend you guys eat a whole food, plant-based, vegan diet. If you're going to eat some meats, hey, get the highest quality you can. I encourage you guys to raise your own meats. Kill them yourself so that you are part of the process. Because, I think it's a shame that people just go and buy these little packages of meat and the animal had to suffer and do all these things that the person had no clue about, right? But nonetheless, eat more whole food plants and process them at home. I am 100% against highly ultra processed foods that are highly processed. When you don't know the process, all these toxins get in there. Companies cut corners to basically save money, to make money, and it's all at the expense of your health. And of course, I encourage everybody out there watching this, whether you're raw vegan or not, to really pay attention to the processes that go into the food you eat, right? Do the minimal and least amount of processing. The processing that I do at home is I chop up things, cut them up, I put them through a slow juicer, I put them through vacuum blending to minimize the oxidation damage, to expand the different nutrients and swallow less air. I also use an Instant Pot pressure cooker to cook my food. And I mean, I eat a very simplified diet, guys, and this is what I encourage you guys out there to do. Work your way to unprocessing your food, because processed foods and foods cooked at high temperatures, in my opinion, are bad news. I really hope that this episode shed some light on why being a raw vegan is so great. And But you don't have to be raw vegan to get the benefits if you are smart about how you prepare your food and how you select the food so that you too could have levels of these toxins as low as raw vegan without being raw vegan if you don't want to. So I really hope you guys enjoyed this episode today, because nobody else is going into the studies, that I do, because I want to know for myself, but then also I get to have the joy of sharing this with you to hopefully make a little small difference in your life, to set the track of your life to a healthier course than a processed food course where you may end up with, some of the problems that these food toxins will give you. So if you guys enjoyed this content, please be sure to give this video a big thumbs up. Also be sure to share this with other raw vegans, even omnivores, especially vegans that eat processed junk vegan food, because they're more toxic than even omnivores, and I'd hope vegans would want to beat omnivores out there in how toxic they are. And I encourage all vegans out there to eat more raw vegan fruits and vegetables and minimally processed foods. So in this episode, you guys learned exactly how to do that. Also, be sure to click the subscribe button right down below so you don't miss my new and upcoming episodes. I'll be coming in every 5 to 7 days. You never know what new studies I'll be sharing with you, what new rants I'll be going off on, or what new knowledge bombs I'll be dropping on you on my YouTube channel. I'm a little bit diverse, divergent than any other raw vegan or even vegans out there, and kind of go off on these crazy tangents so that you guys can enhance your health. That's very important to me. I am only here because I had to make major dietary changes when I was younger, and I am glad to be alive and have this educational work as a big part of my life so I could give back to you. Make sure you click the little bell so you get notified as my new videos come out, and finally be sure to past episodes. My past episodes are a wealth of knowledge. Over 800 episodes, I think, at this time on this channel, dedicated to teach you guys all about how to eat more fresh fruits and vegetables, other raw vegan foods, and minimally processed plant foods. So with that, my name is John Kohler with OKRaw.com. We'll see you next time, and until then, remember, keeping your fresh fruits and vegetables, they're always the best.